Hey guys, so this is the Acadian connection. I believe this is the second part of a different video I referenced to this. We're finally to this point. On 4/12/24, I had words, and part of it said, "The blessing of Evangeline, look it up." And I get like homework projects from God sometimes, and I know, I find them fun. So I just chase down everything. I had been praying about if this were regarding the sharing of the gospel or possibly a repeat of the Acadian situation. Remember the Acadians? They got kicked out of Canada and then they moved to Louisiana. I was praying, I'm like, is this related to that or is this related to something else? So I was given this dream after I was praying about clarifying the blessing of Evangeline, look it up. So here's the dream. The Christians who are holy will be treated as the Acadians. In a brief moment, they will be escorted out of society. In the dream, the people were being chased out of America. One bag is all they had. In the dream, if you could not sign a pact to agree to submit to the New World Order, then you had a set of days to leave or be killed. All of their land was seized by the government. The Canadians were doing the same thing. Canadians were extradited to the U.S. All in the U.S., including the Canadians, were all extradited to South America into rural jungle-type areas. There were a group of conservative military-type men, not sure if they were Christian, but they also had no intent to simply up and leave their land and move to South America simply because some foreign government said so. These men formed a network of militias and stayed off-grid all over the U.S. I saw a little folded-up map, one that had markings with locations of friendlies. As the new government took over the U.S., these men hid in natural areas, caves, forests, etc. And they used old-school tech like walkie-talkies so that they were hard to find. They lived off of the land and none were preppers. All were military type. They sprung up to fight weak points, regions in the new government, and would ambush them. Freedom. They would murder, and I knew this in the dream. Gratefully I was not shown this, but I knew they would murder any that were with the new government. Their goal was to get America back. Their attacks were random, and they were patient. They disrupted the new government efforts badly. They were hunted. Like the Acadians, they were the burr under the saddle of the new government. They fought for all 7 years of the tribulation. These men were ruled by no men, and they said no to the crown, the kingly rule of the Antichrist. I was wondering when I woke up, would they be spared the consequences of destruction during Armageddon, being on the earth 7 years and not seeming to be Christians, but also not sworn to the Antichrist? Perhaps these are the ones on the earth that need to agree to bring sacrifices every feast of trumpets from their land, or their land will get no rain like Egypt. Perhaps these are the survivors of each nation not committed to Christ or the Antichrist. The Bible language of all men on earth, being generally all, is like all people groups. It does not necessarily have to mean 100% of humanity. Zechariah 14:16-19, and it shall come to pass that everyone who is left of all the nations which came against Jerusalem shall go up from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And it shall be that whichever of the families of the earth do not come up to Jerusalem to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, on them there will be no rain. And if the family of Egypt will not come up and enter it, then they shall have no rain. They shall receive the plagues with which the Lord strikes the nations who do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. This shall be the punishment of Egypt and the punishment of all the nations that do not come up to keep the Feast of Tabernacles. So we know from the words given that no one with the mark of the beast has free will. We know from the dreams the very evil, wicked, dark people with the mark of the beast will be taken off of the earth to the pit, reducing the Antichrist's population. We also know that any with the mark of the beast gets the full wrath of God and have the same fate as Satan himself, the lake of fire. So these people in the dream seem to not have any of that. Revelation 14:9-11. And another angel, a third, followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast and its image, and receives the mark on his forehead or on his hand, he also will drink the wine of God's wrath, poured full strength into the cup of his anger, and he will be tormented with fire and sulfur in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb. And the smoke of their torment goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, these worshippers of the beast and its image, and whoever receives the mark of its name. So then in Revelation 13:11-18, it says, then I saw another beast rising out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb. It spoke like a dragon. It exercises all the authority of the first beast in its presence, and makes the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast, whose mortal wound was healed. It performs great signs, even making fire come down from heaven to the earth in front of people. And by the signs that it is allowed, work in the presence of the beast, and it deceives those who dwell on the earth, telling them to make an image for the beast that was wounded by the sword and yet lived. And it was allowed to give breath to the image of the beast, so that the image of the beast might even speak, and might cause those who would not worship the image of the beast to be slain. Also it causes all, both small and great, both rich and poor, both free and slave, to be marked on the right hand or on the forehead, so that no one can buy or sell unless he has the mark, that is, the name of the beast or the number of its name. This calls for wisdom. Let the one who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. So in verse 16 it said, it caused all. So the Greek is from the word pas, or all, as in every single one. But in the Greek parsing, it is pantas, which is actually meaning the plural of all, or the total number in a class that relates to the noun in the sentence, severally, or all kinds, or the parts that make up a whole. So to me this seems like all who live in their cities. It may be impossible to find peoples like these warriors, and perhaps these are the rebels in various regions, in order for there to be people left to fulfill Zechariah 14, for those who come up and bring sacrifices during the Feast of Trumpets in the 1,000-year reign. Okay, so circling back to Evangeline, this part of the dream, and the parallels intended for the Canadians and the Americans. I had to do a little research into Longfellow's writing and look into the history of the Acadian. I already was aware of the Acadians and the Cajuns because we lived in Louisiana for a few years, and the culture is very strong there of the Cajuns. But I didn't fully understand the migration process and how all of these Canadians got booted and sent to Louisiana, so I'm going to summarize it so you can have a very clear parallel. In 1840, Longfellow, the author, invites a friend over for dinner who brings a Reverend Connolly, who tells him a tale that he heard from a French Canadian about a young couple separated in the British expulsion of the Acadians from Canada. And after much research, Longfellow wrote a beautiful story that is based on real events and a traditional story. It was written 85 years after this Acadian event. So Evangeline, A Tale of Acadie by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. This is a story, it's a long poem based on a real event and traditional story that was passed down about the ethnic cleansing of a group of Catholics in Canada called the Acadians and their relocation process. The story focuses on a woman and her search for the love of her life. As families and groups and people are deported to various regions of what later becomes the United States, an amazing crossover. This story crosses over with the 1755 and Jesuit missions in North America. And that was like, that went with that big earthquake, and I was just like mind blown. So incredible. So I feel the need to overview the deportation of the Acadians very quickly, and then show you the interesting parallels in the literary works to these things that I was shown will happen again. The Acadian expulsion. Pre-1754 through 1763, the French and Indian War, sometimes people call it the 7 Years' War, was rolling along in North America. The gist is France, Spain, and England were all trying to grab land in North America in their little games for power and world domination. At the time of the start of this war, the 13 colonies were about 20 years from becoming officially America. Recall back in the day that each country was a monarchy, and most were particular that who lived in their country were of the dominant faith or religion. So England was Protestant, France and Spain were Catholic. They each wanted the land for the resources, and they also cared that the inhabitants were of the same religious persuasion that they felt was correct. So the missionaries were sent from the home country to try and influence the residents. All right, specifically in the area of this story of the Acadians, who were French and Catholic, and they had a nice little community in an area known as Acadia, in what is now Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and Prince Edward's Islands, and some in present-day Maine. Since Britain had nearby islands and the land that was of the 13 colonies, in their greed, they felt that it was a smart idea to take some more land, and in the name of war. Leading up to this time, the Acadians had lived peacefully with the Micmac Indians, and many had intermarried, but the communities were very integrated and worked well to help each other in a primitive time. So about 42 years before all of this, in 1713, the British gained control of the Acadian area, and they wanted all of their subjects to sign an unconditional oath of loyalty. The Acadians thought that this was a lame idea, so they negotiated a conditional oath that promised neutrality. The Brits didn't push it because they thought that the male Acadians might join the war on the French side, so they let them be. After the French began taking more territory that is now part of the U.S., Britain got a little testy and decided they needed to take the Acadian area and boot the people out to avoid any issues. The main issue was that the Acadians were Catholic, and Britain was like, no, convert or leave. So on July 28, 1755, the same year as the Libsyn earthquake, which was November 1st, and in the heart of the Enlightenment period where people are walking away from God, anyway, the British Lieutenant Governor Charles Lawrence and the Nova Scotian Council made the bold move to deport the Acadians. I'm pretty sure that Charlie was a real sweet guy. Seriously think about the impact to every human involved, but I digress. 2 weeks later, on August 11th, 1755, the official campaign began to shoo the undesirables out of town. They were permitted 1 wagon of goods and were told to get on a ship, and they would be dropped off elsewhere. Then, as the people left, they would burn their homes and all of their stored food and move on to the next town. When the British came in with military presence, the Micmacs and the Acadians formed joint militias to help defend their own communities, each having different strengths. But the British gained control of Acadia. The Indians taught the Acadians how to do guerrilla warfare, and they became quite a thorn in the British military side, doing much damage. Yes, in the first phase of the expulsion, many left, but these militias changed the game for a while, scalping the Brits. Many Acadians left and were taken to various places. There was a second wave of expulsions in 1764. In the end, about 14,000 Acadians were relocated, and about 5,000 died of shipwreck, starvation, or disease. The Acadians were sparsely left in Massachusetts, Virginia, Maryland, Connecticut, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, South Carolina, Georgia, and New York. But the Brits noticed these people would huddle together in little Catholic neighborhoods, and they didn't like this. So they ended up sending the majority of the, quote, undesirables, that's what they called them, sounds like some politicians in our day, to the super undeveloped areas in the French territories. The Spanish and Little Britain's wild territories, they called them. The majority settled in what is now Louisiana, and what we see today still as the Cajuns, of which I knew many when I lived there. They are uniquely different than any other people. They have their own version of a French-English mix, very specific dialect that takes a keen ear to understand if you are an outsider. Here's the general gist of the story of Evangeline. The story romantically recounts a little peaceful village that has just had their September harvest, and everything is stored away for winter. They are rejoicing of how bountiful the year was and looking forward to a secure winter. The author made a strong point of saying that the sun was in the sign of the Scorpio, which apparently refers to the main character's deep love and how profound the devotion is. But I have to wonder if there's something more to that. The town gets word that there are British military boats off the coast at anchor, and there are cannons pointed at them. The town goes through the typical reactions like all groups of people have. Some panicked and jumped to conclusions. Others rationalized that the Brits may be there for positive reasons. A few think the Brits may have had a poor crop that year and need supplies and food to take back. A few get ready for the war, and they think this is aggression. To end the guessing and the gossip, one man tells the charming tale of how man is unjust, but God is always just, and justice will always triumph. For 4 days these boats are at anchor, and the 5th day a meeting is called at a church at noon, and the whole town shows up. The men are indoors, the women are outdoors waiting to hear what the meeting is about. At the meeting, the British read a decree that by the king's orders, all of the residents' land, animals, dwellings, cattle are all to be forfeited to the crown, and that they were to be transported to other lands, and he declared the people were immediately to be prisoners. Evangeline, the main character's love, reacted and shouted, "Down with the tyrants," he said, and he was hit and then taken away, and she saw him being loaded on a ship, and that was it. Till the end of the poem, she searches a lifetime for him. The men, of course, were mad. They were heartbroken, wanting to defend their homes and families and get upset. The priest tries to encourage everyone to have love and forgive. 5 days later, they have an exodus of their town, each carrying a bag or having one wagon full of goods to load onto the ship, going to a mystery location. There were so many people, they could not load all the people by nightfall. As those still on the land are figuring out that they are going to be camping under the stars, they look back and they see all of their homes are in flames. The majority of the story is her going from Acadian relocation locations and asking if anyone has seen her man, which often they have, and she's really happy, but then she has just missed him. But then there were a couple of valuable details that I'll skim over. One is toward the end of her life, and she declares that patience and selflessness and devotion to others was the lesson that a life of sorrows had taught her. Remarkably, at the end, she finds her love in a hospital, but he is on his deathbed, and she is able to declare her faithful love to him, his eyes filled up with hope just before he died. That's not so lovely, but interestingly, instead of seeing this as a horrible tragedy, the author has her pray and say, "Father, I thank thee," making her grateful for just seeing him one last time. So that's the gist. So you should be able to extrapolate the parallels, especially after the dream. There will be some sort of declaration in Canada and America by a monarch that all the land belongs to him, and you can leave and go to South America. Some will stay and fight and last until the end. It seems to suggest this. It has been said for years that the world government will expect a great migration to South America from North America. To us, in our sophisticated luxury, I can promise you it will seem very primitive and difficult to those that go through this. I cannot say that this is 100% after the rapture. It may begin before. Also, I do not think that most Christians will go through this. I think the rebels will stay and go through this. Now, there is a small chance that when Christianity becomes illegal in the U.S. just before the rapture, that they will aim to collect or kick people out. I have read some dreams where people sneak out when the borders are closing at Mexico. Nonetheless, it seems this will repeat, and I really do not think this will be isolated to the US and Canada. I think it will be a religious cleansing of all society across the world. Okay, so hopefully you go rapture and you don't have to worry about that. But that is a serious warning and something to take consideration, that all the stuff you have and all the things that you have collected over your lifetime, you need to mentally divorce yourself from all of that. You need to have things you could throw in a bag and be like, this is the only thing that matters to me. I think 99% of the people that listen to me, I don't think this is going to be your issue. I think you're going to be on missions. You're going to be doing stuff with us. We're going to be coming back and helping these people. But for those of you that might hear this after we have gone or after rapture, get ready, because it's not going to be easy. But you know what? We will help you, and the Lord will help you, and it will be worth it, because eternity with Christ is worth it. Okay, so I hope that encourages you, and I'll see you next time.